Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Power Driven Podcast. Today, we have a fun episode. We have a new guy with us here. We have Griff. Griff is our head salesman. You probably talked to him on the phone. The reason we brought him here is because he kind of knows the answer to this question or gets asked this question all the time. The question is today is how much horsepower do you actually need in the world? If you're online or in social media, you've probably been convinced you need a 1,000 horsepower street truck. And the truth is you do. Everybody needs one, maybe two.
Yeah. You need a backup for that one, because they're not like necessarily 100% reliable. So you gotta have another one that you can lean on when that one's broken. And then you need a race truck.
Then you need your friend who can bail you out when that's broken.
Yeah, it's an evolving cycle for sure.
But that is a question you really need to ask yourself when you're doing your build is how much horsepower, I mean, really how much do I want? There is no need. Need to me is like, what is need? What do you want? Okay. You get to buy, you get to purchase what you want.
I will say everyone needs more than stock. At least if you have a second gen 12 valve. Because I remember that's why I got into performance. I tried to pass someone and I was stuck there for miles. So I was like, no, I need more.
I need more.
And then when I went back home, like years later, I worked here, then drove the same truck back home. And I was on that same stretch of road and I needed to pass someone. I was like, yes, finally. I gapped the fool. I was like, yes, I've done it.
They didn't know you were racing, so it didn't really count.
I was trying to pass. It was the back road.
It was about.
Yeah, it wasn't racing.
On the street, how much you need, it's hard to say. For me, it's a question of I need more than I have. That's pretty much my answer. It has always been my answer.
You either have not enough power or not enough traction. It goes back and forth.
I need more than I have. But the reality is I got this truck that's actually sitting outside right now. I got a 06 Ford Power Stroke. It's pretty much dang stock. And my 1,500 horsepower Awesome Daily is having issues and has been down for a month or two. And I've been driving that stupid thing around. It's pretty easy to drive.
I mean, to be fair, your issues are a pedal, but that's regardless.
I put a new one in, it still doesn't work. So there's got to be more than a pedal.
Whatever.
Sounds pretty normal, actually. I think Ruby spends more time in the shop than out of it.
It is not the most reliable tow vehicle ever. I might say it once in a while. It is the best tow vehicle ever, but maybe not the most reliable.
So I'm the boring one here. How much horsepower do you need? Depends on what you're doing with the vehicle. I feel like added power on tow vehicles makes it easier to tow. Case in point, I had a 99 Dodge 24 valve and it was a 5-speed. And when you're towing up a hill and you run out of power and you got to go down to 4th gear and you run out of power and you go down to 3rd gear, it's harder to tow because you got to navigate those shifts and
take a run at
hills and things like that. And when I added more power, it made it easier to operate that truck. So for example, if I was setting that up for my wife to tow, I would get more horsepower. The downside is then you start getting into EGT and coolant over temp problems when you go beyond stock. And so to a limit, how much horsepower you need makes the vehicle more easy. Or for example, let's say you're towing on a 2-lane highway that's not divided and you need to pass somebody. If you have stock horsepower, you're not passing people if you're pulling a car trailer with your race truck or your camper behind you. You basically just have to be slow. If you have a 1,500 horsepower race truck like Todd's, you could pass bullet bikes if you wanted when you're towing. I mean, it's possible. But it makes it safer, in my opinion, because you can navigate a pass much faster. You can get out of hairy situations to a point. You get up over 1,000 horsepower and you start breaking loose when you're pulling the trailer or you get on a wet road. Mm-hmm. Then it takes more drive skill. It's probably not safer, but I'd say up to a limit, more horsepower makes it better when you are having it and you're not using it all the time. It's just having it and not needing it than needing it and not having it. That's the problem.
I will say there's nothing more embarrassing than losing speed going up a hill. I just can't handle that. I feel like it's a real my pride. You know what I mean?
It hits you hard.
Yeah. Or having to downshift.
Dude, I can live with a downshift. Okay.
Well, I think a 68 maybe changes your mind a little bit on that.
On a 4-speed, like if you can't pull 4th gear, it's like you need more power. This much I do know. Like, I mean, if it's a curvy road, you have to slow down for turns. Okay, that's acceptable. Yeah. But as much as a grade, if you have to slow down for grade, you got problems. Let's be honest.
I'm the bad one in that one, I guess. I'm the one that cruises in my Fummins and have it turned all the way down on power. And I'm going, I think I can get this hill at about 40 if I can get better fuel mileage, I think.
Nah, dude, it's about the miles per gallon. I'll tell you what, I have a Cheshire Grand passing those passenger cars up hills.
I know. Yeah. And it's fun because I can always go and turn my power up to pass them. My issue is it's all about, I'm always one that I'm like, how can I get my best fuel economy getting there? And I'm like, I want 500 horsepower or 600 horsepower still, but I'm always the one that turns it down and drives so much slower.
Nah.
I mean, people chase fuel economy numbers. That's a very common thing. Diesels got popular in the first place because they got such great fuel economy compared to the gasoline engines of the time, like the big block Chevys, big block Fords. That's why diesels kind of came out because you go.
Don't forget about the big block Dodges. Those motorhomes, man, they would pull every grade at 20 miles an hour and 6,000 RPM.
I think if they could pass anything except for a gas station.
I think that was the saying, yes.
But normally they couldn't pass that either because they couldn't get to it.
So, Griff, you're on the phones a lot and you talk to people. What are people like desiring in the world? Like they call you up and say, here's what I need. What do you tell them and what are they telling you?
I would be honest. Most people are looking for a 500-600 horsepower truck. Like that is pretty the stereotypical horsepower that they're looking for. They want something that's a little bit better than modern horsepower. A little bit, not enough.
And we're talking wheel horsepower or engine power?
Wheel horsepower.
Wheel
That's pretty common for what we're doing. Which from what we sell, that's normally what we're looking at. We're looking at a good towing setup that makes 500, 550 range, which is a good running truck stereotypically, I would say.
I wish people had the chance to actually ride in a true 550, 600 horsepower truck. Because in their mind, what they think and the reality are two different things. Because if you have a true 600 horsepower to the ground, that will just blow the doors off any truck off the dealer's lot right now. I mean, not even close. 500 crank and a big heavy. New trucks are so heavy. They're so heavy. As you get a 500 horsepower to the crank versus 600 horsepower to the ground, like in a second Dodge or even a third gen Dodge, I'm like, those are like, it's like a totally different class of speed, those two things. You talk about this often about knowing this.
Yeah, I feel like it's like, you get it, social media and all that stuff. Everyone claims to have 1,000 horsepower street truck, and a lot of them do, but a lot of them don't. And so everyone that wants to build their truck, even if they have a bone stock truck, they're like, "Oh my gosh, I want that 1,000 horsepower street truck." And you don't need that. You don't need that straight out of the gate. You need to just baby step it. Start with a turbo. Start with basics. Start like with a tune. Start with just bumping that up, and you might realize that 500, 600 horsepower, it is a very fun power level to sit at. And it's like super reliable. You build it right, it's solid.
And I'm one that 550 horsepower is what my truck is. And I'm around, like this is the nice thing about working here is that I get to be in 1,000 horsepower trucks and I get to have the enjoyment of a 1,000 horsepower truck when I want to go break someone else's truck. But ultimately, that's the first thing I kind of like tell people. Like if they get on the phone, they're like, well, I want to make 1,000 horsepower. Okay. Well, what do you want a 1,000 horsepower truck to do? I mean, you're going to have a hard time towing with it and going, well, I want my transmission to live forever and I want 300,000 miles. Okay. Well, then we got to roll this back a little bit. 1,000 horsepower truck is going to be it can be reliable if you're driving it at 300 or 400 horsepower 90% of the time, and you just want 1,000 horsepower occasionally. But if you're looking for 1,000 horsepower truck that you can go rip on, pulling a trailer all the time, you're going to have issues.
Like even you, like your 1,000 horsepower tow truck, you have a 600 horsepower tow tune, right? Like you have a special tune that is nowhere near 1,000 horsepower. It's even like beyond that. You even like have torque limiting for. Talk about your tune.
So yeah, those that don't know, I have a 60 RFE tow truck, makes about 1,100, and my tow tune, I have like a super safe tow tune I can give it to anyone in. That makes about 650 horse. But yeah, it's got torque limiting below like 1,700 RPM. That way anyone can drive it. They don't try to like pull a grade at 1,400 because it'll do it. Stock turbo on the manifold, it'll make a lot of torque down there. It also has a limiter up top. So that way when cruise control kicks in, it doesn't like do a downshift and zing it to 5,000. So it's got a couple of things like that. The tune I tow in is closer to about 750, 800. And that I can basically flat foot anywhere as long as it's not like the middle of summer up some super stupid grade. And then coolant temps start to get a little high. But EGT control, solid.
It's an amazing tow truck.
It works great.
It is amazing.
It's awesome, like setting the cruise control at like 85 and then hitting a grade and seeing like passing cars in front of you and be like, I know these guys are going to slow down on this grade and I don't want to. So I'm going to go the far left lane of this 3-lane highway and gap them on the way up. And that's what happened. All in 6th gear.
So I remember when I got my first diesel truck up to 499 horsepower, couldn't quite hit that 500 mark. And I thought, man, I'm never going to need any more power than this. This is all I need. This is so fun. And then I went to the racetrack and it ran like a 1440 because it was a manual. And I was like, man, Camaros are beating me. Like I thought I had a rocket ship, stock Camaro, or a stock Corvette back then. And so then I wanted more power. But before that was a 235 horsepower truck stock. So it probably made 200 to the wheels. So at $499, I had more than doubled it. It felt like a rocket, and it was a great daily drive around town, but it wasn't enough. So I eventually got myself into a 12 valve, and I was like, I need more power and I need compound turbo so I can control the smoke and EGT and still tow, because I like to race, so I still had to tow with it. So then I ended up with compounds, and I ended up right about 600 to the tire. And I was like, this is the perfect truck. Transmission lasts forever, doesn't get hot towing, does everything I want. And, that was, 15 years ago. Fast forward, about 5 years after that, and the rear end started howling on it. Well, 600 horsepower for 100,000 miles, I'd roached the ring and pinion. So one thing on a second gen Dodge, you can't handle more than, in my opinion, 600 horsepower long term, or you start going through U-joints and the rear end. The newer trucks, they have those AEM axles that are bigger, or if you have a Dana 80, which is ultimately what, the right choice would have been for my truck, is to upgrade to Dana 80, then the rear end and stuff could handle it. Transmissions can be built, but at the end of the day, horsepower grew so much as the industry grew that I'd take a customer for like a little joyride in my truck, and they're like, this is it? Like, you want a diesel shop and this is all it has? Some kid in town has a Duramax with like a 369 swapped on, and we get in a race in Mexico, obviously. And, and we're like dead even. And I'm like, what the heck, man? like he's just basically got a tune and so depending on who you run with, you start needing or wanting more and more horsepower. But I would say the most fun and reliable that my truck is honestly when it was that 600 horsepower towing compound setup, the spooled fast, and could give the keys to my wife or anybody that could drive it fine. It wasn't fast enough to really get many speeding tickets or break the law too bad. So, that was kind of like the heydays. Now the truck makes, I don't know, we haven't even dynoed. It's 4 digits. It's over 1,000. And yeah, it just does stupid rolling burnouts in second and third gear. If you just shift just right, it'll even, spin them in overdrive. And it's just like, unless you run around in 4-wheel drive, I honestly don't enjoy the truck as much now as I used to. I have to admit, at customer rides, like we had some foreign customers come over, and they're like, man, in America, you guys could do anything. Yeah. American cowboys or whatever, I take them out and they're like, you can do this on the street. And I'm like, it was like, yeah, every day, man. And so it's more fun to give people joy rides and stuff in, but it's not as good of a daily driver or tow truck anymore. I'll just say that.
That definitely happens. And we've talked a lot about this on this podcast about trade-offs, bigger turbos, bigger injectors, everything comes in compromise except ported heads. We have not found the limit of those. Those are amazing. But as the trucks get more and more powerful, it is true. There is a trade-off. Like, my original truck was a 98 12 valve. And my first mods were like a fuel plate. I think that was like fuel plate, governor springs, and some timing. Just very simple stuff. Still my stock HS35. And I remember driving some 2-lane highways. I wasn't towing anything, but I could pass cars like almost like bullet bike fast. It wasn't, but it was like instant. Just give some throttle and you just around them like in a snap. No downshift, nothing. The 5-speed, so just in 5th gear. And my wife's like, this is incredible. Like, you think you need more power in this? I'm like, well, of course I do. But the reality is it was super competent. Like, it was easy to pass people, good mileage. It was a very, very good truck. And as if any of you followed me for a long time, you've known I've destroyed that vehicle now. But fast forward to when I had triple, same truck. Now I have triple 475s on it. So that's actually, no, I had a 4202 and 2 475s with 2 intercooler and an aftercooler for those who are geeks who are into, intercooler stuff. But and that truck was super fun as long as you had a really long road. In town, it was just stupid. I was never in boost in town. Like, I was always just under boost. There was nothing in town I could do, no road long enough that would be, I would actually do that in town, because once you start building speed, it builds speed so ridiculously fast. You should not do this anywhere near other people. It's just stupid. So I was always like hunting for roads out on the way home. So I go home and I take the long way home and I had a little rip or something. So like once a day I get a little rip, where before any little street I could just have a little blast. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And
any
so,
stoplight, anything, you could just, gap some soccer mom.
Yeah. And it was great. I think 1300 or 1400 horsepower. This is 10 years ago now. And it really was cool. And I'm not against it, but just, it was not a good street truck. Kind of like Will said, it was fun as it was. It was only fun in the right occasion. It wasn't fun always. And that's what happens as your trucks get more and more powerful. You start to limit the times you can really enjoy it. And so, I still, there really is no answer to how much you need, because it's a very personal opinion, kind of like ketchup. How much do you need? All of it.
Todd's a big ketchup guy, in case you didn't figure that one out yet.
I'm still boycotting the local Arctic Circle because she wouldn't give me ketchup. Anyway. But,
wow. How dare she?
I know, that's really offensive. But anyway, yeah, you just got to realize everything has a trade-off, and power is one of those things that comes with a trade-off. It's not all positive. In your mind, before you have it, it's all positive. You think this is going to be great.
It's going to be world changing. You think that extra 100 horse is going to just change everything.
And it could change everything, like how much you're working on your truck.
I think when you're stock horsepower, I'm going to go back to Will. So we went to Will's garage back before Power Driven existed. And my brother had bought a 12 valve, and we had met Will at the track, and we go over there, and Will's like, okay, we're going to put some fuel pressure. We're going to do a little bit of timing, and we're going to pull the fuel plate. And we hopped in that truck the first time, and we were like, oh my gosh, this is the fastest vehicle we've ever driven in our whole life. And a 160 pump, 175 pump, because it would have been a 5-speed, nothing fast or special. And I come to work here years later, and like first time I go and take someone's 215 truck, and we put an AFC Live on it, put delivery valves, bump timing, do everything. And I go and drive it and come back and I'm like, can someone go drive that truck? I think it's broken. Like, it's not making the power it's supposed to. And I'd driven much faster trucks at that point in time. And Barron goes and drives it, comes back and goes, no, runs great. Like, that's how it's supposed to be. And I'm like, oh, I cannot believe that is, because that truck should have made another 100 horsepower over the 160 pump that we were driving. And worlds different. It's shocking to me now.
Yeah.
It is true. Your body acclimates to what it is. And so when I've had that same experience, when I've driven a customer's truck and they're like over the moon, like this is the most amazing thing. Like Todd with Project Farm drove his truck after he got 500 horsepower, and I'm like, it runs good. And he was like, holy, he's mind blown. I'm like, that's a good running truck.
Like, I have this opinion, and I'll stand by it for a very long time. The only way to have a fast toy is to have a slow daily. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
Like, I have a stock excursion in my life just to make everything else smell rosy. Like, it's great.
You do. That's actually really good advice. Like, sometimes you need to just get in a car and drive something slow for a month. Yeah. So
to really appreciate what you have.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Because otherwise you just get used to it. Your body adjusts. You get used to that speed. And then you either keep going more and more and more and braking more, or you reacclimate to something slow. So after I get done with my Ford 6-seater, Ruby's going to feel real fast.
Yeah. But I think there's different speed levels for different platforms as well, on where it becomes unreliable or not as practical as a daily. My personal truck was a 12 valve, and I think once I got to 4-digit power, it wasn't quite as, as fun, and it's just, it's still fun, but it's not as good of a daily and towing and things like that. On the flip side, you have a 2006 Common Rail where they have modern timing and fuel injection control and things. And when your truck was at 1,000, you had like towing compounds, and it was solid, reliable, not a problem. The axles could take it. It wasn't, and so I wouldn't say there's any drawbacks of having 1,000 horsepower compound turbo Common Rail, versus a stock one. It ran better. There was no, other than giving it to your teenage son or daughter, there was no downside to 1,000 horsepower Common Rail. But 1,000 horsepower 12 valve on the street, start getting a little bit, you start making compromises, smoke and spool up and things like that.
It's a little more rowdy because you got your timing a little bit higher to get that number. Like, yeah, it is true. The more modern your vehicle, like Common Rail, even in this Ford 6-seater, anything has variable timing, computer controlled timing, even your VP44 trucks. You can have more power and have it be street friendly. That is a huge drawback of mechanical injection. The old 12 valves is you kind of set it up for what you want to do, and that's it.
Yeah.
The new injectors do help that a lot.
Yeah, that's
though.
true. The power jets.
Those power jets do help with not having to run so much timing and a 215 pump on there. I mean, look at Mike Hudson's truck. It's not a daily driver,
but it could be.
But he could drive it every day, and I mean, it makes
He's not in the 1,000 horse club yet. Though. He's high 900, so it doesn't count.
980s.
Yeah, I mean, 980 is a pretty rowdy 12 valve, and I mean, he could probably daily drive that every day. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, the technology we brought in the 12 valve world and some to come soon will make that easier to achieve, no question. Like, there's some really fun stuff on the horizon for 12 valves, but there still is the lack of control you have in a modern, electronically controlled engine. That, I mean, I drive my mega cab around and it's super fun. It doesn't sound as good. The 12 valves sound better. Meyer's like just over here just scowling.
I don't know. Radio and then go gap some fools. Okay.
I think a 6.7 sounds really good. So
especially a P pump 6.7.
I actually, Todd went to go right before we went to the Phoenix race. Todd starts his truck because we fixed his transmission, and all of a sudden he rips down the road. I'm like, I cannot believe how good a 400 6.7 sounds like. An S400 on a 6.7 sounds like a rate. I mean, Meyer, same thing. Like when Meyer went and did his burnout, and I'm just like, oh, I can't believe how good those sound.
Yeah, but cubic inches sound good. It is true.
Yeah, they don't sound like a street tractor as much. You get them up at 4,000 RPMs and they're making a noise that 5.9s don't sound that good. They are tingy. Josh always talked about that, and I was always like, I don't know what you're talking about. I think 5.9 sounds fine. Now, being around 6.7s that have S400s on them, they're such a better sounding motor. They truly are.
I don't know. I mean, when I was running a big single on my 5.9 12 valve, and I had just an open exhaust, nothing lit. It was awesome.
It was rowdy
awesome.
for sure. Yeah, I mean, it shook everything. That was, you almost guys had a dyno after hours because we couldn't talk on the phones when you guys dyno 12 valves. But Meyer goes and dynos basically the same horsepower with his race truck, and it's just like zings through the window real quick, no big deal.
Yeah, it's true.
It's probably the precision balancing you did on your engine, right?
It was.
You and that gram scale, became quite friendly.
Hard. It definitely did. I don't know if you're mocking me, but that happened.
One thing, when you have a power goal, you need to be realistic about the build as well. Like, let's say, how much power you need, like I said, is a personal opinion. There's no right answer. I can't tell you here's what you need. You just got to figure out for yourself what it is. But once you decide what that is, really important is to make sure the build is appropriate for that power level. Like if you want 600 horsepower and you want a tow, compound turbos are probably in your future. Mm-hmm. Like, you really need to think about what are you trying to build, and if you're trying to build it to be reliable, obviously the more power you're going to make, it's going to be, exponentially more expensive. Turbos, transmissions, engine builds, possibly depending on how far you want to go. And so that's something to think about.
I also think it's important to judge where you are going to be built as far as power too. Because we get guys that are like, oh, I want to build a 1,200 horsepower motor for my 500 horsepower truck. And it's like, you do realize how loose we have to run everything. Like these are at layman's terms, they are built as if we were building a motor that was considered needing to be rebuilt. It's because we're trying to make things stay alive. And so that's the only problem that I've seen people do is they try to go build a 1,200 horsepower motor. And you're like, so you're putting a 500 horsepower turbo? You're going to make any more power than that? Well, no. Okay, then we need to reevaluate this engine build a little bit. It doesn't hurt to go put billet rods in there. It doesn't hurt to do bearings. It doesn't hurt that. But you start building those clearances. That's the worry that I've always ran into with people.
It's kind of
those
like
clearances, the hone finish, everything. It changes to try to keep that engine alive.
It's
not necessarily good.
Yeah, we've had conversations about transmission specifically. I want to build a 1,200 horsepower transmission for my 500 horsepower truck, and Will's like, you can't do that. I mean, because the valve body, it's not going to work right. It's the same way with your engine. Like, you don't want to have a 1,200 horsepower engine build or a 1,500 horsepower engine build for a 500 horsepower truck. Everything's different. The clearances, how long the engine's going to last. I mean, Griff's right. Like, don't think, I'm going to buy a 1,200 horsepower engine because I want it to last forever. My 500 horsepower truck, it will last way less amount of time than a 500 horsepower build engine.
Cams are wrong. Heads are wrong. I mean, all of it is wrong for that type of build. And it's a disservice. It really is. I mean, there's parts. I mean, there's no problems with putting some parts in there to be able
Yeah.
to make that power. But yeah, we get lots of people that we got to talk off of that edge because they are dead set. I'm making a 1200 horsepower motor, and then you find out goals, and you're like, that's not right. Like, well, let's reevaluate that.
Yeah, really, if you want to build the ultimate 500 horsepower truck, you can, but that is not a 1200 horsepower engine.
No.
That might be rods, might be bushings on your cam, but you're still going to see for clearances for 500 horsepower. You're going to set up all that kind of stuff so it actually works and works for a long time at 500 horsepower. So if you're going to do an engine build, be realistic with what you want to do because engines are built different for how you want to, operate them.
And transmissions, yeah. And they both are very much built different for everything that we're doing. And so turbo sizing is a big thing on that as well. You can't put a 1200 horsepower setup on a 500 horsepower truck and think it's going to work well. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, everything's engineered for, as you get further and further in this industry and then just into engines, specifically turbos, everything's engineered for a certain level. And if you're away from that level, you need a different set of engineering guidelines, whether it be turbos, engines, transmissions, anything. Like machines are made to do a singular purpose. And so when you design it for that, it works well. Now with modern technology, we can spread that out a lot. Like you say, your tow truck's 1100 horsepower, but you can have anybody drive it at 600 horsepower. But your engine is probably built more, I'd say more similar to a, towing engine rather than not like your race truck engine.
Yeah. The way I like to look at it is, it's easy to think like, oh, I have a 500 horse truck. I can see the logic. I have a 500 horse truck. I want to build that engine at 1200 horsepower. And because that's overbuilt, it's going to be awesome. It'll last forever. You have to remember when we're building these 1200 horsepower engines, we're not doing different things because we want to do them. We're doing them because we need to do them because of the 1200 horse. If I knew I was building it for 500, there's things I'd be like, yes, I don't have to set my clearances loose. Yes, I don't have to do this hone finish that's going to hold the oil on the ring lands or whatever.
And it might burn a little bit more oil because it's honed so aggressive.
Yeah, that way I won't have this blow by problem. I was like, there's a lot of things that I would be excited to not have to do because it is only a 5.7 whatever 100 horsepower engine. So when you look at it like that, like hopefully that makes it make more sense.
But it's Myers, so it's always going to be 4 digits.
Not always.
I bet you that 6-liter has seen 4 digits in its life.
It may. We'll see. It just sounds so achievable.
Yeah.
You should talk about this a little bit, Will, because you're like our honing specialist. Like you talked about burning oil. So if you're building this, I come to you and say, well, I'm going to make it a 2000 horsepower, drag race motor. But I'm going to put it in my 500 horsepower truck. You'd be like, dude, you're an idiot. Specifically hit the hone on why you not want to do that.
So on modern honing, they have a thing called a profilometer that measures the peaks and the valleys in the cylinder wall. And
that's the texture you see, like the crosshatch. That's people have seen.
Yeah, that crosshatch you can see. And so this profilometer thing, it can measure the depth of the valley and the depth of the peak. And
the height of the peak.
The height of the peak. And it can give you what's called like an RA or roughness average. But within that roughness average, there's the peak and the valley depth and the height of the peaks. Well, the peaks get knocked down by the rings and basically wear out your rings. And so in a modern hone, you set the valley depth first by the coarseness of the diamond stones you hone with, and then you knock the peaks off with this really fine CBN stone. But for example, we're building like a race engine, like for one of our race trucks making well over 1,000 horsepower. We're using like an 80 grit diamond, like the most aggressive they can. These valley numbers, they're in microns, but they might be like 150 microns deep. That's how it holds the oil. Well, because when you get this bigger power level, there's more heat, there's more fuel there that washes the oil, there's more RPM. It's just harder for that oil to stay there to lubricate the rings and the pistons, and that's also what forms that seal with the rings. Well, you get like a street engine, like I just built an engine for one of my old big block Mopars. We used a 170 grit diamond, like, less than half as aggressive. That ended up with valley numbers around 35 or 40, which is kind of closer to where like an OEM, spec would be on like a modern engine. And so the valleys aren't nearly as deep. And like I said, with modern honing, you can control the peaks for the ring wear. But one problem is there's another thing they call the RK. That's the average of the peaks and the valleys, not the roughness average, but it's just like how much of the upper half of the peaks are there. And that's like how long the cylinder will last. Well, if you have really deep valleys, that RK number drops, which is kind of like the wear resistance of the cylinder. So you will wear out the bores faster with those deep valleys. But if you have a race engine and you don't have those valleys, the ring won't seal and it might only last one dyno pole and it's all glazed and you have tons of blow by and it's not working. So it's like you have to sacrifice a little bit of that in the honing process. This is all just kind of newer technology in the last 5-6 years. A lot of this stuff's come out, but it's very interesting what has been discovered with. And it's crazy. You get like a big race, like we're talking a 5,000 horse, like a Proline Hemi or something like that. They don't run as coarse of a cylinder wall or as deep of valleys as we do on one of these super stock diesel pulling engines. Even though the power density arguably is about the same on them, something about the diesel, it needs more oil there. But anyways, back to street engines. If I built an engine using those 80 grit stones and getting those RVK numbers up there in the like 120 micron, it'll burn oil. I mean, it might burn a quart of oil every 300-400 miles.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how much it breaks in, it's just going to burn oil. But if you don't have that on a big engine like yours, you're going to have 8 or 10 PSI of crankcase pressure on the blow by and just doesn't seal up as well. So difference there.
Yeah, like designing
just
for
in
your
the hone.
purpose. Yeah, that's one single thing of the engine, how we hone the cylinder walls. Like there's so much in an engine build, and that's one of them. Camshaft selection. I want a big cam. I mean, that's a big deal. I got a pretty good cam in my race truck that I sure wouldn't want to put in my street truck. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything moves the power band. Like kind of like turbos. Cams move the power band around just like turbos do. If you put a big turbo on, you might make a lot of power, but your RPM range is sure higher. And if you have a camshaft that's for 1,500, 2,000 horsepower, that's going to be optimized for an RPM range that your 500 horsepower turbo is not going to be happy. They're working in different ranges.
And the big cam lifts the valve higher, so it wears out the valve springs twice as fast. Technically, if you look at the valve, if the valve is stroking a third higher up and down, it's going to wear out the guides faster. The rocker arm gets more ratio as it side loads the valve more as it opens. I mean, you get big lift cam. A lot of times you need like a roller tip so it doesn't side load the valve enough to wear out the valve guide. I mean, all this stuff just kind of comes into play as you get bigger and bigger. And yeah, you could make big power with a small cam, but if you're at that engine level, you might pick up 200 horsepower with the right cam. So why would you give up 200 horsepower and run a street cam? Well, the same thing happens. Why would you, use a race cam that might gain you 3 peak horsepower and wear your engine out twice as fast? You're not going to do that,
Yeah. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not advocating that you shouldn't make big power. I'm advocating you make an educated decision what you want to do. I mean, I make big power. These guys both make big power. He likes power in our trucks.
And I'm 750.
Yeah.
Like it
runs great.
I want to have a goal of 750 in my truck, but I'm one that I get to watch your guys' trucks break.
And I feel like anyone that sets a horsepower goal, like you're going about it all wrong. I think you need to be realistic with what you're going to use the truck for. Yeah. And once I started doing that, I feel like I enjoyed the performance side of it more. Like example for that would be my dad's truck. He wanted a solid tow truck. And so I didn't do anything that I felt like would make that a worse tow truck. He wanted I was going to give him a single turbo. He wanted 2 turbos. And so that was like, whatever. I'm like, okay, cool. Perfect. Compounds tow so great. And then he wanted this and that. And I'm like, okay, cool. And we did it and we built it. And it straight out of the gate, he wanted like 400, maybe 500 horse. Straight out of the gate, it made like basically 700. And then after just a couple, tweaks and tunes and stuff, he's like knocking on the door of 900 horse and he's still at 18 degrees of timing. And I'm like, and Will's like, dude, you could bump your timing up 4 degrees and you could pick up so much power. And I'm like, why? It's supposed to be a tow truck. 18 degrees starts amazing. It runs good. It spools great. It tows amazing. Why would I bump it from that? And I think just sticking to whatever the goal is of what you're trying to do really helps. Because when you have like your mix match parts, like, oh, you want to do this with it, so you put this big part on it, but we don't want to make whatever it is, so we put that part on it. You get something that does okay at everything. I feel like having a truck that does what you want well and decent at everything else is way more important.
And I think with that is that going and finding a good source, one source typically is how you do that. Because the problem is, and I'm not saying that that's the case for all things, but the problem that we run into is we get guys that called 10 companies and they got 10 different turbo recommendations. And so they put 10 different things on there, and then they had a terrible truck, and we almost have to be like, yeah, sorry, you're going to have to redo this and this and this. Well, this company told me this. And I get that, guys, but that's I think the hardest part with building some of these trucks sometimes is that everyone has a little bit different of an opinion on how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're no different. I mean,
Right.
we're a high altitude company. I mean, we're at 6,000 feet basically. We are small turbos. Like everyone's like, why are you running such a small turbo? Because that's how we make them run good up here. Like you get them down to sea level and they run better, but there's benefits to bigger ones. So
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. Like I like your thought process of like just how you're going to do with the truck, because you didn't make any compromises for towing. You put a camshaft in there, but it's a towing.
It's a
camshaft.
towing. Yep.
Do you have a ported head on there, or towing ported head?
Mhm.
So we have a head on
Towing
there, but
ported head.
it's not the big huge head. It's a towing
Mhm.
ported head.
Now, what's the big difference between like a towing port and the hot street? Honestly, it would make more power with the hot street head, but we have thinned up those exhaust ports a little bit, chasing flow. And so if you're towing with high AGT or, sustained load, that street head, is it going to crack at 100,000 miles? Possibly. I don't think the tow head's ever going to crack. We've left all the meat there. And so that's really where, once again, you're making compromise. You put like a stage 3, like a race head on there. I mean, some of the ones I've seen from these other companies, they're so thin, you might not make it, 1,000 miles before you crack that head. Like it's a dedicated race. It's basically an eggshell just waiting to crack, but they're chasing performance.
Yeah, that's what you got to do.
And so that's why we have a tow head, is so that it's a reliable performer that's not compromising,
And that's like the blessing and the curse about a 12 valve is they left like the factory, the heads kind of suck, but they left so much easy low hanging fruit that with that, just a little bit of blend job, a little bit of valve job, you can get a lot of gains without sacrificing, reliability.
Yeah.
and still have a pretty rowdy tow truck. I mean,
900
even at
horsepower.
750, it was a rowdy tow truck at 900.
It does good.
That's great.
I mean, I would argue your dad's 900 horsepower dually is more fun to hoon around on the street
I would
than
argue
my
that.
4-digit power, beautiful stainless piping. But I got a GT55, bro. I got big turbos. What's your big turbo? An 80?
It's an 80.
Yeah, my big one's a 106.
Yeah, and I would 100% argue that I'd be faster. I bet if we both flat-footed it right there, I would get to the stop sign first.
Absolutely.
I guarantee it.
Yeah.
Not really.
If you had to drive one around town, you'd pick your dad's truck every
And
time.
it's clean. Yeah, I can drive it, and I can. That's what thing too. Like your truck, it's big turbos, 12 valves. Generally, you have to be a little hazy to get him to come up. You're not going to do that in town. You're not going to do that in a stoplight. I can do it anywhere else.
But that one time at the junction, airstrip where we were drag racing, I think, what were you running, like 8.0s on
I don't remember.
Papa Stump?
Yeah.
I think I ran like a 720 in the 8th. I mean,
I don't
726, something like that, like 103, 105.
Oh no, they didn't. So that time They didn't have a timing light, so we don't know what I ran. But I know.
Did
that,
you have some draggy numbers from it?
No, I didn't have any. I forgot to bring my draggy. Oh no, you brought your draggy, and I ran it one time, so you might be right there. I don't.
Yeah, I have the data, so
Okay. That's true. That's true. Hey,
I can bring receipts.
regardless, it was the second fastest
I mean, that's
thing
a
there.
whole that's a whole second difference in an 8th mile race. That's almost 2 seconds in a second and a half in a quarter mile. But at the end of the day, you're right. If we had a stoplight race and we both started with no boost, you would win every time.
And I think
Unless
that's
I grabbed low range before you saw me.
Don't even.
I've drag raced low range one time on accident. It didn't go well.
I imagine not. And I think that's a lot of times as people, when they're going and looking for horsepower too, is they're trying to build their truck for that 10% and not their truck for the 90%. I think if you build a truck for 90%, then if it gets to that 10%, great. But that 90% is what you're driving every day. I mean, that's the thing, is we got lots of people you got to tuck off for that and that. I mean, I'd love to say everyone needs a Ruby and everyone needs a Meyer truck, but if you're like, you're going to go jump in it and be like 500 horsepower is great. And then you can go build it for 500 or 600 and then have it make capable of 1,000, and you'll have an awesome truck. Because yes, it's not going to be a great 10% truck. It's going to be an awesome 90% truck.
Yeah, that's solid advice. Go ahead.
There's one more area where we haven't really touched on, and it's about the vehicles itself. If you remember, one of my buddies, Scott, came and visited, and he had that 4BT swapped Scout. And I looked at the data tag on that little 4-cylinder Cummins, and it makes 105 horsepower. And it was bone stock. And he's sitting there telling people at the shop, yeah, it'll go like 80 on the highway. And Griff's like, I have no idea how a 105 horsepower engine could even push that 7,000 pound 4-wheel drive. It's lifted on 35s.
Crew cab international. Like I'm sitting here going at 105 horsepower. I'm like, because he was like, yeah, I cruised down here at 70. And I'm like, was something towing you? Like impossible that you did that.
But I rode with them, and because it's leaf spring front and a little bit loose, there's no sway bar, and he off-roads it a little bit. Like I wouldn't want 500 horsepower in that truck. Like you would seriously hurt yourself. You would crash it. He said when he's out there rock crawling, sometimes he's broken a few U-joints. So he didn't want to turn the power up a bunch when he was here, because he's like, it's got some Nissan 5-speed transmission. Who knows how much power it can handle. And it had 8 lug axles, but at the end of the day, that vehicle is not the right vehicle to dump 1,000 horsepower Cummins into, unless you do a bunch of suspension and handling upgrades. Now, when he left, of course, he had the power driven treatment. I think he left with about 150 to the tire. So he's like, man, I should have done this years ago. So in his case, adding 50 horsepower was like life changing to that vehicle.
It's 50% more. I mean, it's pretty big.
That was a large,
but still, like a 7,000 pound vehicle. The only other story I remember of this, we had a customer come and he had that first gen.
I was doing
exactly that one actually.
I could tell you his name, yeah, for sure.
And he had, was it 22-inch highway tires that?
Yeah, I don't remember what it were, but yeah. And then he had us do a P pump like conversion on it,
and then he had those stupid fast spooling, that Borg EFR compound.
You're talking about
set.
two different trucks.
Oh, you're right.
He's talking about the first gen.
Yeah,
the Death Trap,
which Todd says is the scariest vehicle he's ever driven.
We were driving it. Yeah. And it was like, I refused to take it on the highway because it just seemed like sketchy. It's like one of those things you could just like turn the steering wheel halfway around and it wouldn't go any other, just stay going straight or whatever angle.
And wasn't that making about 500 to the wheel or so?
Yeah.
We put our towing compounds on it.
600. And then I took him for a ride and he drove and I was like with him because I want to show him how AFC Live and stuff worked. And he hops on the highway and immediately merges at like 105. And I'm like, one of the most nerve-wracking experiences I've ever been. I'm like, I hope this guy's a good driver. And he's just like, oh wow, this thing's so great. I'm like, I'm afraid for my life.
But your power is very dependent, not how much you need, but how much you can safely use on the chassis, the suspension, the handling. Like my junker drag truck, I remember when I was making about 700, you go out on the street and it would do, it was probably more like 900. It would do a rolling burnout at 100 miles an hour in two-wheel drive. Like anything over like 750, 800 horse, you couldn't even hook it up on the street. But that truck only weighed 5,000 pounds. It was kind of ratty, and it just, you couldn't do that. But on the racetrack with slicks, I mean, you ran it down the racetrack. Did it feel scary and uncontrollably like you're going to die at the racetrack?
On the way up to speed, it felt very safe.
It was actually surprising the first time I got after it, and we're getting going as quick as I am. And I'm like, I was waiting for this thing to be the Death Trap because that's basically all I've ever been told. And my first time experiencing it was I was in this truck driving it down the road. First time, never driven it before.
Your first time was on the drag strip.
Was on the drag strip. Is that they're like, okay, you're going to go shift gears and you go through it. And I'm like, awesome. We're going to see how this goes. And so hop on it, going up to speed, surprisingly, very stable. Stopping, on the other hand, a little scary. That's actually, I'm like,
the whole cage and cab are rattling together. And, like the brakes are competent, the steering was fine, but everything else, like I didn't feel like I was going to die, but I definitely wondered if the truck was going to shake apart around me. It was great.
It was enjoyable. I mean, that was fun. I had a blast doing it, but yeah, first time stopping, I was going, all right, I could see why this could be scary going the quarter mile and going a lot faster. Like I can't even imagine.
I mean, you're talking 130s in that old truck with floppy slicks on the back.
Yeah, I bet you it was sketchy at that fast because eighth mile that we were racing was like, okay, this is fast enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just over 100. So.
But what brings up a good point about, having a competent chassis. And I mean, we have a real firsthand experience in that because forever, all I did was chase power in the Godfather. It was a full frame truck, nothing special. I mean, it was really, the chassis was never really thought of any more than something to hold an engine.
I think the only actual race truck that was heavier than you was actually like semi trucks.
Yeah, I should have raced
I
this
think you're like the official heaviest race truck ever.
Because if that added power, I put it in. Big intercoolers, let's go. Big turbos, let's go.
Huge water tank.
Huge water tank, let's go.
Like mathematically, it worked out.
Yeah, and it made amazing power. It was, but it never went fast, really, because the chassis just could never take it. It just never ever worked. And the same thing, like on the street, like you're talking about, like that first gen Dodge or that Scout, it'd be so scary. Like having a power appropriate for the chassis is really actually a smart thing if you value your life.
But that same truck of yours, we got it on the sled pull track
Yep.
with axles swapped and drop box and the nice hitch and the weight in the front and everything. And all of a sudden you had more chassis than all the other competitors, and you could use that 2,000 plus horsepower, and you put the gap on fools at UCC in the sled pull. But
it did. Yeah, that chassis worked. That actually worked like really, really well. Media had no idea. That's so funny about it. It's such a funny story. But
I mean, who engineered that piece of crap?
Let's not talk about it. Will did against my wishes. I told him, don't waste your time on sled pulling. You don't know anything about sled pulling. We should focus on drag racing. And we sucked at drag racing.
Which
and
what
won,
we're
and we
good
won
at,
the sled pull.
Multiple times, actually.
Yes,
I'm
we
pretty
did.
sure.
We did.
I think that you went back to UCC multiple times, and that's where the only event we feel like we ever did good at.
we had the sled pull in the bag. If as long as it worked, we pretty much had that one. Everything else, not so much. But yeah,
I mean, we owned a dyno, so we had plenty of dyno testing,
just didn't have
and we
valves.
never really owned that event. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, but it gave us a lot of like R&D. We invented our timing gear because of that event. It's slip timing. We figured out valves the next time. And one time we made decent power, but no, we had a broken intercooler. Yeah, I mean, just, you know what, lots of stories. But the chassis did work for sled pulling, that's for sure.
Just yesterday, I was looking at the graph of when it blew up because Meyer wanted to know randomly. It was a 2369 and it blew up at 4,150 RPM, and torque had just barely leveled off there, and it was flat. So that means the horsepower, usually if you peak torque at, let's say 2,800, 2,500, you're going to make peak horsepower at 35, 37. We had just peaked torque at 4,200. That thing was headed, I would say, to 3,000 for real. I think it was going there.
If only those valves would have stayed in the dang head and the block would have stayed together. Such is life.
Oh.
But
It's true.
Anyway, I mean, but back to the original point of this whole entire discussion is like,
I actually have a question on that.
okay.
Each one of you, what do you feel is the ideal horsepower then?
Don't ask us that. You just made a mistake. I would say if you're two-wheel drive, I would say 1200 was pretty fun. And so four-wheel drive, I think you should double it.
Pretty fair assessment.
That's
there.
good logic, right?
I've never found it yet.
Okay.
So, as somebody that's swapped 5 engine blocks in my race truck in the last 2 years, I'd say just under 1,600 horse, where you don't have to swap an engine block, is the perfect amount for the race truck at the current 590 index and its current weight. If I had a lighter weight vehicle, 3,000. Yeah, that's where I want to be.
3,000 horsepower.
I guess it depends.
To the tire.
I would
Yep.
say right now, I'll probably accept less power than I've ever have. Like right now, the Cummins car, I'm around 1,650, let's say, on fuel. Let's say around 1,850 with a little bit of spray average across the track. And that's a pretty dang fun truck. I might like a little more power. The reality is part of my stage in life. Right now, I got 4 kids all in school and I'm very busy. And so I don't have a ton of time to dedicate fixing race trucks. I just don't. And so right now, I'm probably pretty happy with my power level because it's been somewhat reliable. I mean, our last race was an issue, but it wasn't engine, it's just transmission issues. And we have a few little small things to fix, but nothing crazy.
Yeah, which is all of them. Like, it's not like it's special.
Yeah, the failures are not like they used to be, right? Catastrophic failures. They're just, we can fix this and I can go race again the next event.
And well, that's what we always joke is can you drive it back on the trailer?
And so far I have.
The green truck always seemed to be
Never.
It was prepared to have a winch and pull it back up.
Yes, exactly. So right now, I'd say honestly, I'm probably for my race truck, I'm probably 2,000 and under because I think we can handle that relatively well. And 2,000 is probably on the upper end, but 1,800 is kind of where I'm at actually. And the motor's been very reliable there. I have really not any hardly issues that are substantial. And so yeah, for now, with my stage of life and the amount of time I can dedicate to racing and working on race trucks, I'm gonna have to play a little bit more conservative because I don't want to live it in the shop. I can't.
What would you do it for the street? Like,
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is because like again, back to the goal. Are you trying to make 2,500 horsepower in your race truck, or are you trying to go fast? Because there's other ways
Okay.
of going fast.
Yeah. So in Ruby, this is I spent a lot of time.
What is Ruby?
Ruby's
for those who don't
my
know?
mega cab. It dynoed 1,500 horsepower in our dyno, and I've done it in the
It's a
street.
2006.
2006 mega cab heavy truck. And in 4-wheel drive, it's fun, but it's like it's almost uncontrollable on the street. Any bump you hit, it's going to torque steer and drag you across the lanes. Like, I mean, it is all over the road. So I decided I wanted to make a 2-wheel drive tune that I could lay into it in third gear and not blow the tires off. So it's a lay it in third gear, not blow tires off tune. I'm probably around 850, I would guess, where I can third gear, lay and it goes really good. And then you're not all over the road. Like it's rock steady because I'm in 2-wheel drive. It's not the front axle's not pulling me around. So around 850 in that truck is pretty awesome for 2-wheel drive. 4-wheel drive 1,500 is way more awesome, but it's way more sketchy.
Yeah. And actually you bring up a good point because everyone's like, oh, like, I mean, back to my original thing where I wanted to pass them full and I needed to turn up my truck to do it. When you pass people, when you have like 1,000 horsepower on tap and you don't just like shift into 4-wheel drive, you're just like, okay, will it take more throttle? Will it take more throttle? And you end up being sideways next to someone. Yeah. It's just not good.
No.
I did that on the on-ramp earlier. It was terrible. It's having like a solid, like I think for me, if I'd be really honest and like you just want something reliable, I think 500-600 is very, very fun. If you're more of an enthusiast, you can get up to that 700-800. You might be working on your truck a little bit more, but it'd still be fairly reliable. Once you start talking about 4 digits, you've really kind of limited what that truck's capable of and how long that truck's going to last. I would say that's my opinion on it.
Like your Tina's a living exception, but you've had that transit in and out quite a few times.
Everyone says that. That was a lot of testing.
But not for power
I've
reasons.
reused like all the clutches and all the parts for the last like half a dozen.
Right.
times.
That was more R&D than actual breakage. That wasn't like power wise. Oh. So I'd say it is possible, but I mean, the fact is you're your own tuner, your own turbo builder. I mean, like you're able to get away with it because you have so much control where a lot of people are at the mercy of a tuner, which if you have a good tuner, you can probably get away with a lot of it on a modern truck.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
ish.
And I would go, I mean, the truck that I had, Shorty is what my example is, because back when it was a 5.9 Common Rail HE351, really Meyer kind of loaded that tune up. What do you think it was? 8?
No, the lowest tone on that thing was 1,100, and it's basically always been there.
It was scary at 1,100, but that was probably the most fun I've had. 1,100 horsepower. Like I took my neighbors out. I took a couple of people out, and they still talk to me about it today because they're like, all of a sudden, is the truck would sit and then you would get on it and it would pick up and like pick the front end up, and you could just watch the speedometer go whoa. Yeah. And I mean, scary power. And I'll be honest, in a straight line, fun. Like that was enjoyable. But the first time I was going to Walmart, I was like, oh, I got to go pick up some from Walmart. And I was just kind of getting on the on-ramp and gotten the throttle a little bit. And it's like starting to get squirrely down the road. It was starting to go, okay, this might be a little more power than I like. And I know
there were some suspension problems there. That was after the coilovers, and it didn't have a sway bar. And so, yeah, corners wasn't really its jam. We've made some changes since then, and hopefully it's better.
A few things. So what do you think, Will?
One time I had my junker drag truck when it was street legal. And
in case you guys don't know, if you ask Will Terry any single question, he will relate it to his junker drag truck.
So I was leaving Las Vegas Motor Speedway, and one of my buddies who tried to ride down the track with me, once I started running 12-second passes on street tires, they wouldn't let me have passengers. And so he had to take the walk of shame because he was riding with me. And at the starting line, they stopped me. And when we left the track, he's like, well, how fast is that truck anyway? And he's following me in his like C6 Corvette that he thought was fast. And so I got on it on the on-ramp in Mexico, of course. And actually, this is more than 10 years ago. So I was on the freaking highway, I-15 south at I-15 out of Las Vegas. It's probably like 12:20 at night.
Allowed, apparently.
Anyway, I was getting on it, and he's like, well, how fast is this truck really? He told me as he was leaving, and I was like, I'll show him. And I got on it, and I got that thing spinning. I was probably going 60, but I had about 150 mile an hour tire speed going on the on-ramp. And it came around and whipped around so fast. And I know sway bar in the front of the truck at this point, and I went straight sideways. I was going, 50 mile an hour down the highway, and 50, 60, and I have all this tire speed. And I let off, and I was all the way sideways. I'm looking at the guardrail, and then it whipped back around the other way as I turned and slide, and now I'm looking at the ditch, and then I saw the guardrail again, and about 2 more little wags before I finally caught it. And this whole time I'm off the throttle, but I had so much tire speed going that it was just, and like, I wouldn't say I almost crashed, but I got good and scared, and I kind of went home like a hurt dog with my tail between my legs, and I decided I need to respect this. At the time, it was only making about 750 horsepower. So in a mid 5,000 pound 2-wheel drive front heavy ratty race truck, the perfect amount on the street is enough to scare you before it kills you. So 750 horsepower. Final answer.
Nice.
I like it.
I actually do have a different answer. I've had a few different things about it, but if you were coming up to me, an enthusiast, and say, Todd, I got about a 350 horsepower truck. What kind of power do you think I need? I would probably advise you to, as you're an enthusiast, you want to build trucks. I'd say just do a little bit more than you have now. And I would say enjoy the build. Don't try to get it all done in a month. Like I have a 350 horsepower truck and I want 1,000 horsepower. There's nothing wrong with that, but you will enjoy the truck more and you'll enjoy your experience more if you spread that build out. Just be patient. Enjoy 450 horsepower. Enjoy 550 horsepower. Enjoy 650 horsepower. There's a bunch of milestones and every one of them's fun. If you just skip right to the 1,200 horsepower, you missed a lot of fun along the way. So I'd say my advice is if you want to go big, do it. Go there. I've been there and I highly encourage you. But don't shortcut the ride because you're going to miss out on a lot of fun. Sorry about that, Meyer. That's what happened to Meyer.
I was actually thinking of that very thing. That was a really good answer. Yeah, the journey is the fun part. I went from 550 to 1,061.
Yeah.
It was fun though.
Small jump. And then went from an extended cab long bed to a short bed single cab in that jump. So it lost a lot of weight in the process.
I mean, I think that's true, honestly, with almost anything in life. You got to enjoy the journey. I mean, if you moved out of, from homeless into the biggest mansion, you wouldn't appreciate it. You'd missed all those like mid-level houses or cars or vehicles.
All the accomplishments, all the like, yes, it worked. All like, oh, this turbo's sweet. Oh, this compound turbo's sweet. All these big injectors showed up. Parts day is here. Woo.
Oh, my head gasket's blown. Now you have a good, head gasket and head studs.
O-rings, head studs. There's just so many milestones that I'd say if this is a hobby for you, enjoy them all because they're all fun. I've had fun the whole entire time from 350 horsepower with my HX35, my past people with that field plate and timing. That was a lot of fun. To now my 1,500 horsepower truck that scares the crap out of people. That's a lot of fun. And everywhere between has been fun. So I say enjoy the journey and it's not a race. That's my advice.
I like it. Yeah.
So anyway, guys, what's the perfect power for you? I don't know, but we want to help you out. We want to help you find it. So you can give us a call here at Power Driven Diesel. And this man, Griff's probably going to be one of the guys you talked to, or one of his guys. And we want to help you out. And anyway, power's great. We're a big fan of power. And I hope you enjoy the journey. Thanks. See ya.